In this episode, we're going to take three names that often make beginners' eyes glaze over and turn them into something you can compare calmly and usefully. NIST, COBIT, and ISO/IEC. The Certified in Governance, Risk, and Compliance, CGRC, world is full of frameworks, and it's easy to feel like you are supposed to memorize a giant catalog of acronyms and document titles. But the practical skill is not memorization, because it is understanding what each framework is trying to help you do, what level it operates at, and how it fits into governance and risk decisions. A lot of confusion comes from comparing frameworks as if they are competing brands that all solve the same problem in the same way. They don't. Some are more about governance and management, some are more about security controls, and some are broad management systems that can include security, privacy, and risk as part of a bigger program. By the end, you should be able to hear those names and immediately think purpose, scope, and how they relate, instead of panic. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at Cyber.Author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Before we compare the frameworks, we need a clean definition of what a framework is in this context. A risk or governance framework is a structured approach for thinking, deciding, and organizing work so that an organization can manage uncertainty and meet expectations consistently. It typically defines concepts, categories, processes, and sometimes specific practices or controls. The key is that frameworks create a shared language, which is essential in governance because decisions involve multiple groups who need to coordinate. Another key is that frameworks are designed to be adapted, not copied word for word, because organizations differ in size, complexity, and regulatory obligations. Beginners sometimes treat frameworks like rulebooks, but many are better understood as reference models and organizing tools. If you think of a framework as a map rather than a script, you will use it more effectively. The exam tends to reward that mindset because it focuses on appropriate use rather than blind adherence. Now let's introduce the three names at a high level and give them each a mental label you can keep in your head. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, is often associated with practical guidance for managing security and risk, especially in U.S. government and organizations influenced by that ecosystem. Control Objectives for Information and Related Technologies, COBIT, is strongly connected to governance and management of enterprise information and technology, meaning it helps leadership and managers ensure technology supports business goals and is controlled appropriately. International Organization for Standardization and International Electrotechnical Commission, ISO/IEC, refers to international standards bodies that publish standards used globally, including standards related to information security management and risk management. These are different kinds of things, even though they all touch risk. One is heavily tied to detailed guidance and control thinking. One emphasizes governance and management objectives, and one emphasizes formal management systems and internationally recognized standards. That difference is the first step out of confusion. A useful way to compare frameworks is to ask what level they operate at: enterprise governance, management system, risk process, or control set. Think of enterprise governance as the boardroom and executive layer, where decisions are about alignment, value, and accountability. Think of a management system as the organizational machine that keeps running, where policies, responsibilities, processes, and continual improvement are defined. Think of a risk process as the steps for identifying, analyzing, treating, and monitoring risk. Think of a control set as a catalog of safeguards you can select from to address risks and requirements. Frameworks can span multiple levels, but they usually have a center of gravity. COBIT often lives strongly in the enterprise governance and management space, while NIST is often used heavily in risk and control guidance, and ISO/IEC frequently supports formal management systems and standardized processes that organizations can certify against or align with. If you keep level in mind, you stop expecting them to behave the same way. Let's look more closely at NIST first, because beginners often meet it early and then assume it is the definition of security itself. NIST publications often provide structured guidance, including ways to think about risk, categorize systems, select controls, and assess security posture. The important point is that NIST is frequently used as a practical toolkit. It helps you translate risk thinking into concrete choices. That can include a risk management process, control selection guidance, and assessment approaches, depending on which specific NIST publication or model an organization uses. For exam purposes, you do not need to memorize document numbers to understand the role NIST plays in many environments. You need to understand that NIST tends to be strong at connecting policy intent and risk decisions to actionable security requirements. It is also often seen in environments that need a structured, defensible approach to security and compliance evidence, especially when interacting with government-related expectations. So your mental label for NIST can be practical risk and security guidance. Now let's move to COBIT, which many beginners misinterpret as just another security framework. COBIT is broader than security because it is about governing and managing enterprise information and technology in a way that delivers value and manages risk. That means it is very concerned with questions like whether technology investments support business strategy, whether processes are controlled and measured, and whether responsibilities are clear. COBIT includes objectives and practices that help organizations build consistent management across technology functions, which can include security but is not limited to it. A beginner-friendly way to think about COBIT is that it is a governance and management lens that helps ensure technology is directed and controlled like a serious business capability. If NIST often answers how you might implement and assess security-related practices, COBIT often answers how you govern and manage the overall system that includes security, delivery, and operations. On exam questions, COBIT tends to show up as a framework that supports governance alignment, accountability, and management objectives. So your mental label for COBIT can be enterprise governance for IT. Now let's talk about ISO/IEC, because this is where beginners often get tangled in names and numbers. ISO/IEC refers to international standards that can cover many topics, including information security management and risk management. The key concept is that many ISO/IEC standards define management system requirements, meaning they describe what an organization should have in place to run a program in a structured, repeatable, continually improving way. This management system approach is very compatible with governance because it emphasizes policies, defined roles, documented processes, and regular review. Some organizations pursue certification against certain standards, while others align without formal certification, but in both cases the value is the same. The standard provides a recognized structure for managing security and risk. A beginner should focus on the idea that ISO/IEC tends to package security and risk work into a management system that leadership can understand and auditors can evaluate. So your mental label for ISO/IEC can be formal management system standards. Now that you have mental labels, let's compare them in terms of typical use cases and why an organization might choose one over another or combine them. If an organization wants a detailed, structured approach for managing security risk and selecting controls, it may lean heavily on NIST-style guidance because it helps connect risk decisions to control implementation and assessment. If an organization is trying to mature how it governs and manages technology overall, ensuring it supports business goals and is controlled and measured, it may use COBIT to frame management objectives and responsibilities. If an organization wants an internationally recognized structure for building an information security program as a management system, it may align with ISO/IEC standards to establish consistent processes and continual improvement. These choices are not mutually exclusive, and that's one of the biggest confusion traps. Beginners often think choosing one means rejecting the others, but in reality, organizations often combine them, using one for governance framing, another for risk and control detail, and another for management system structure. The exam expects you to understand compatibility rather than rivalry. Compatibility becomes easier to see when you think about how governance decisions flow. Governance starts with objectives, defines policies and responsibilities, and sets expectations for managing risk. A framework like COBIT can help define governance and management objectives, ensuring the organization has decision structures and measurement practices. A standard like ISO/IEC can help define how the security program operates as a management system, with roles, processes, and continual improvement. Guidance like NIST can help define how to assess risk, choose controls, and evaluate whether controls are effective. If you map them this way, each one has a job, and the confusion disappears. This also helps you answer exam questions that ask what framework is appropriate for a given need, because you can identify whether the scenario is asking for governance alignment, management system structure, or detailed risk and control guidance. Many wrong answers are wrong because they pick a framework that is not suited to the scenario's level. Another common confusion point is the difference between frameworks that describe what to achieve and frameworks that suggest how to do it. Some frameworks are more prescriptive, offering detailed guidance and examples, while others are more abstract, defining objectives and leaving implementation choices to the organization. Beginners sometimes get frustrated when a framework doesn't tell them exactly what to do, but that flexibility is often intentional because organizations vary. In exam terms, you should be able to recognize that governance frameworks often describe what good governance looks like without prescribing exact technical steps. Risk and control guidance often provides more detailed structures for selecting and assessing safeguards. Management system standards often describe required elements, like documented processes and continuous improvement, but still allow organizations to tailor the details. Understanding this spectrum helps you avoid overreach, meaning you don't claim a framework does something it doesn't. Overreach is a frequent exam trap because an answer choice might attribute detailed control catalogs to a framework that is more about governance objectives, or it might attribute governance authority to a control-focused document. It's also important to understand how these frameworks interact with compliance requirements, because compliance is often the reason an organization adopts a framework in the first place. Requirements can come from laws, regulations, contracts, or industry standards, and frameworks help you translate those requirements into a coherent program. For example, a compliance expectation might require risk assessments, documented controls, evidence of monitoring, and clear accountability. NIST-style guidance can support the risk assessment and control selection parts. ISO/IEC management system standards can support the documented process and continuous improvement parts. COBIT can support the governance and measurement parts that ensure leadership oversight. The key is that compliance rarely says use this one framework and nothing else. Compliance usually says meet these expectations, and frameworks provide ways to organize and demonstrate that you did. When you think this way, frameworks become tools for evidence and governance, not trophies. To stay out of confusion on exam day, you also want a simple elimination strategy when you see framework names in answer choices. If the question is clearly about enterprise governance, decision rights, and management objectives, lean toward a governance and management framework mindset, which often points towards COBIT. If the question is clearly about establishing a structured, auditable management system for security, with documented processes and continual improvement, think of ISO/IEC. If the question is clearly about practical risk management steps, control selection, or assessing whether controls are effective, think NIST. This is not a guarantee for every possible question, but it is a strong first pass that will eliminate many wrong options. Then you refine based on the scenario's context, like whether it is international, whether it is government-influenced, or whether it is asking for governance versus technical detail. Beginners often lose points by switching levels mid-question, like answering a governance question with a control catalog mindset. Keeping the level consistent is the simplest way to stay accurate. As we close, remember that comparing frameworks is not about choosing a winner, and it is not about collecting jargon. It is about understanding the job each framework is good at, the level it operates on, and how it helps an organization align security and privacy work with objectives, risk decisions, and compliance evidence. NIST is often a practical guide for risk and security decision-making and control-related structure. COBIT is often a governance and management framework for ensuring enterprise technology is directed, controlled, and measured in support of business goals. ISO/IEC standards often provide a formal management system structure that supports consistent processes and continual improvement across organizations worldwide. When you carry those mental labels and level distinctions into your studying and into the exam, the names stop being intimidating. They become tools you can select appropriately, which is exactly what a CGRC professional mindset looks like.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.